The plastic rose wreath still hung on Miss Jacqueline's front door, the one she put up for Easter. But it was already midsummer, and neighbors were starting to wonder why she hadn't come out onto the porch. She was the kind of woman who waved at mail carriers, handed out butterscotch to kids, and still went to Bible study every Wednesday. But one day she was just gone. Her teenage great-nephew said she went on vacation, but her passport was still on the kitchen counter, and her favorite mug shattered in the trash. This is a story about trust, family, and the boy she believed she could save. Jacqueline Holloway was not the kind of woman who turned people away, not from her porch, not from her kitchen, and certainly not from her family. At 68, she had made peace with the pace of her days: morning coffee, gospel radio, crossword puzzles in ink, and a Bible that sat beside her recliner like a trusted friend. Her house on DeKalb Street was small, tidy, and quiet. The kind of place where neighbors waved and birds returned every spring. So when her niece called from Baton Rouge, crying about her teenage son getting into trouble, about fights at school, missed court dates, and a boyfriend who had moved in and moved on, Jacqueline didn't hesitate. She didn't ask for permission from the church ladies or wonder what the neighbors would say. She simply cleared out the back bedroom, washed the old comforter, and waited by the window for the Greyhound bus to arrive. His name was Dontrell. 15 years old, tall for his age, shoulders squared like he was ready for a fight he hadn't been invited to. He got off the bus wearing earbuds and carrying a single duffel bag that looked like it had been dragged through every city between Louisiana and Georgia. His eyes scanned the crowd like he didn't want to be seen, but didn't want to be alone either. Jacqueline stood out easily. Floral dress, straw hat, a purse full of hard candy, and church bulletins. She waved when she saw him. He didn't wave back, but he walked toward her. The first few days were quiet. He kept to himself, ate what she cooked, slept when she told him to, and said thank you in a voice barely above a whisper. Jacqueline told her neighbor, Miss Thelma, that the boy just needed some rest. City kids carry things, she said. You gotta let them put it down on their own time. She set up routines. Breakfast at 7, chores by 9, no phones at the table. She printed out his school enrollment forms and drove him to the counselor's office herself. She bought him new sneakers from the outlet mall and added his favorite cereal to her grocery list. And when he failed his first math test, she sat beside him with flashcards and encouragement. You're smart, she said once. You just don't know it yet. Dontrell didn't say much, but he didn't run either. And for Jacqueline, that was enough. She told the ladies at church that he was coming around, told the pastor she might bring him next Sunday, told herself that this was what family was supposed to be: messy, slow, and worth it. But on the second Tuesday after he arrived, she noticed something. Her front door was unlocked when she came back from the pharmacy. She always locked it. Always. Inside, nothing looked out of place. But the silence felt different. She found him in the back room, asleep. The window was open. She didn't ask questions. She just closed it and made dinner. The next day, she noticed 2 of her pain pills were missing. Not the whole bottle, just 2. She told herself she had miscounted. The bottle was old. Her memory wasn't what it used to be. A week later, she caught him staring at the lock on the basement door, the one that stayed bolted, the one no one had any reason to use. He looked away when she noticed, said he was just looking for the broom. Jacqueline smiled, told him it was in the hallway closet, but later that night she stood at the top of those stairs and listened to the silence below. It wasn't the quiet that scared her. It was that strange, heavy feeling, like something inside the house had shifted, like her home had developed a heartbeat that wasn't hers. Still, she prayed over him before bed. Still, she left the porch light on, because when you take someone in, you don't start with suspicion. You start with hope. And Jacqueline Holloway, despite everything she'd seen in life, still believed that hope could win, even if something in her bones had started whispering otherwise. By early August, the neighborhood had stopped whispering and started wondering. It wasn't like Miss Jacqueline to miss Sunday service, let alone 2 in a row. She never ignored phone calls, never skipped grocery runs. Her routines were like clockwork, visible from porches across the street. Blinds opened at 7:30, coffee pot whistling by 8, porch light off by 9. It was her way of saying, I'm still here. But then, She wasn't. It was Miss Thelma who rang the doorbell first. No answer. She figured Jacqueline was napping, or maybe out back picking tomatoes. But when evening came and the lights never turned on, she tried again. Still no answer. By the third day, Miss Thelma noticed the mail piling up. That's when she called her cousin at the city office. "Do a welfare check," she said. "She lives alone, and that boy, well, I don't want to assume, but she don't usually act like this." The officer who showed up was polite but distracted. The house was locked, no sign of forced entry, windows shut, car in the driveway. The boy, Dontrell, answered the door in a gray hoodie and socks, said she'd gone to visit a friend in South Carolina. No, he didn't know when she'd be back. Said she'd taken a train. The officer asked for her number. Dontrell said she forgot her phone. He asked if anyone had spoken to her. Dontrell said not lately. She liked to travel quiet. The officer looked around. Clean house, tidy kitchen, no blood, no mess, nothing to report. Still, the story didn't sit right. Miss Thelma didn't let it go. She told the church prayer line, told her sister, told the gas station clerk who used to chat with Jacqueline every Thursday. "That ain't how Miss Jackie travels," she said. "She always says goodbye." But Dontrell kept to himself. He mowed the lawn, checked the mailbox, waved when people passed, just like she used to. To anyone not looking too close, it was almost normal. Then came the garbage collection. The sanitation worker noticed something strange. The bin was heavy, not full of food waste or yard clippings, but heavier than it should have been for one boy. And there was something sharp inside. He didn't open it, but he made a note. 2 days later, the pastor tried to call again. Still no answer. A week passed. Jacqueline's cousin from Savannah showed up. She had a spare key. Inside, the house was still clean, but things were off. Her framed photo with her late husband was gone. A drawer in the bedroom stood open, empty. The linen closet looked untouched, like no one had done laundry in weeks. And then there was the basement door, locked. But Jacqueline never locked that door. The cousin asked Dontrell for the key. He said he didn't have it, said she must have taken it with her. She looked at him for a long moment, then called the police. This time, they came with a warrant. They opened the basement door just before noon. Sunlight filtered in through the kitchen windows above, but none of it reached the steps below. The officers moved slowly, flashlights sweeping across the narrow stairwell, past dust and peeling paint, until the beam caught something that made them stop. At first glance, the space looked like any old southern basement. Concrete floor, stained walls, shelves lined with jars of forgotten preserves and rusty tools. But near the far corner, beneath an old water heater, was a stack of blankets. No, not blankets. It was a mattress, folded in half, covered in dark stains and duct tape along the edges. Nearby, a space heater lay on its side, still plugged in. Beside it, a purse. Leather, worn down at the edges. Jacqueline's initials etched into the corner. They didn't touch anything. They called in backup. By 3 p.m., crime scene tape wrapped around the front yard like a ribbon. Neighbors stood on their porches, arms folded, watching silently as officers came and went. The boy, Dontrell, was nowhere to be seen. Downstairs, they cataloged what they could. There was a chair with rope marks on the legs, a broken lamp, a Bible with a torn cover, a sheet of notebook paper folded twice and stained with something reddish-brown. On it, a list of names. Only one had a line through it, Miss J. There was no body, not in the basement, not in the yard, not in the crawl space. They dug, they scanned, they even checked the storm drains. Nothing. But the evidence told a different story. Jacqueline hadn't left on a trip. She hadn't gone to visit anyone. She hadn't even packed a bag. She had vanished. And the boy she let into her home, the one she clothed and fed and prayed over, was missing too. A bolo was issued. Photos printed, bus stations checked, relatives called. No one had seen Dontrell, not in days. His phone was gone. His school-issued Chromebook? Factory reset. In the kitchen, her refrigerator was still full. Expired milk, wilted greens, food for a woman who thought she'd still be home by the weekend. What they found wasn't a body. What they found was a pause in the rhythm of a quiet life. A rupture in the trust between family and the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, love and patience could save someone from the darkness they carry. They didn't find Jacqueline. But they stopped calling it a disappearance. They started calling it a homicide. The news spread in waves, first through the block, then the church, then the wider community that had known Miss Jacqueline for decades. Flyers went up with her photo, grainy and warm, taken at a church potluck 2 summers back. People gathered on her porch to pray, holding hands and shaking their heads. Not Miss Jackie, they said. Not her. The police stayed quiet. They had no suspect in custody, no clear motive, no body. But they had suspicion and a name. Dontrell Holloway, the boy she took in, the one who had no stable home, no strong father, no clear direction. Some neighbors had never even seen him. Others remembered his eyes, quiet, unreadable, the kind of eyes that made people lock their doors at night without knowing why. The investigation dug deeper. They called Baton Rouge, pulled old school records. He'd been expelled twice, fighting, defiance, suspected theft. His juvenile file was sealed, but whispers filled in the blanks. One teacher said he'd carved something into his desk. Another remembered he once told a classmate, "People disappear every day." Back home, the search continued. Every storage unit in a 3-mile radius, every drainage ditch. They brought dogs. They checked under the porch, behind the church, even under the old oak tree behind the rec center. No signs, no witnesses, just silence. Until someone came forward. It was a boy from the neighborhood, 15, same age, said he used to skate with Dontrell behind the middle school. He remembered something. A week before Miss Jacqueline left, Dontrell asked him a weird question. How long you think it takes for someone to stop looking for somebody if there ain't a body? The boy had laughed it off. Depends who it is, he'd said. Now it didn't seem so funny. Police searched again, recanvassed the house, looked deeper into the phone records. Dontrell hadn't left the house often, but one trip stood out, a rideshare trip, 15 miles out to an abandoned farm lot. No camera footage, no signal afterward. But they found a shovel at the site. Fresh dirt, no remains. Just dirt. Every discovery led to more uncertainty, a trail of almost maybes and just missed chances, the kind that don't hold up in court but tell the truth anyway. Jacqueline's niece, Dontrell's mother, refused to believe it. He's not capable, she told the news. He's a good boy, he just needed love. But others weren't so sure. The pastor organized a vigil, the city held a meeting. Her photo stood in front of the altar, surrounded by flickering candles and silent tears. The community tried to find peace in prayer, but behind the smiles and bowed heads, there was fear. Because if someone like Miss Jacqueline could vanish, what did that say about the rest of them? And what did it say about a boy raised by the same blood? The fall came slowly that year, like the town itself was reluctant to turn cold. Leaves drifted down in lazy spirals, and for a while, life on DeKalb Street tried to move on. The mail resumed. The porch sat empty. A new wreath hung on the door. Not roses this time, but a sign from the city. Property under investigation. Do not enter. Still, no one forgot. The police stopped giving updates. The flyers yellowed in store windows. And even the most persistent neighbors stopped asking, "Have you heard anything?" Because everyone already knew what they weren't saying out loud. But behind the scenes, something was happening. One officer, a young recruit named Daniels, kept digging. Not officially. He wasn't on the case anymore, but he had grown up 3 blocks from Jacqueline Holloway. She taught him how to play chess once. He remembered her as the lady who handed out warm socks at Christmas. He couldn't let it go. Daniel started rechecking files, phone pings, traffic cams, school databases. He noticed something everyone else had overlooked, a library card. Issued to Dontrell a week before Jacqueline vanished. Logged into once. He pulled the IP address, logged into again, in Macon, 3 weeks later. That was the break. A cross-check with local surveillance showed a blurry figure in a hoodie at a pay-as-you-go internet cafe. He wasn't using a phone. He was on a desktop computer. The timestamp lined up with the login. The police got the footage. It wasn't conclusive, but it was close enough. Now they had a lead. An anonymous tip came in 2 days later. Someone had seen a boy who matched the photo sleeping behind a gas station near the interstate. By the time officers arrived, he was gone. But there were signs. Food wrappers, cigarette butts, a nearly empty backpack with a school-issued calculator still inside. They knew it was him. They issued a nationwide alert, raised the case from missing person to fugitive, and for the first time, a major network picked up the story. She took in her niece's son, the anchor said. Now, police believe he took more than her trust. The segment ran for 2 minutes, then it was gone, but it was enough. The phone calls started again. I think I saw him in Birmingham. Is this the same kid from Atlanta? He was in our youth center once. False leads. All of them. Still, it kept the case alive. Daniels unofficially kept working. He started mapping every potential sighting. The dots formed a line. Southbound. Always south. And then they stopped. Not in a city, in a swamp. A wildlife officer found the abandoned backpack first, then a phone, then a muddy sneaker, and finally something worse. Beneath a pile of branches, near a shallow stretch of muddy water, they found what was left of her purse. Leather, worn, the same initials. No remains. But everyone knew. They stopped calling it a search, they started calling it a wait. Winter settled in with a quiet that felt too heavy, too still. On DeKalb Street, no one decorated that year. The porch where Miss Jacqueline once sat with her crossword and a cup of sweet tea stayed empty. The mailbox rusted. The neighborhood held its breath. They never found her body. No official statement ever confirmed what most people already believed. There was no arrest, no trial, no justice. Just a slow fade into silence, like her life had been folded up and packed away. But the story didn't disappear. Miss Thelma started a community watch group. The church created a scholarship fund in Jacqueline's name. Her cousin in Savannah launched a website with her photo and the words, "She took him in. Don't let the story end here." It gained traction, quietly at first, then loudly. A retired journalist wrote a feature, a podcast picked up the case. Her name began to circulate, not as a headline, but as a warning. In the months that followed, sightings of Dontrell continued, none confirmed. He became a ghost in his own story, a blurry face at a bus stop, a name whispered by kids in detention centers, a rumor passed between social workers. 1 year later, a letter arrived at the church. No return address. Inside, a page torn from a notebook, folded carefully. On it, just 6 words. "I'm sorry. She didn't deserve that." No signature. The handwriting matched old school records. The ink was faded, but the truth in it cut deep. They pinned it to the bulletin board near the church entrance. People paused to read it every Sunday. Miss Jacqueline's chair remained empty. Her porch light was never turned on again. But in living rooms across the city, families had different conversations about trust, about second chances, about the limits of love when it isn't met with change. And sometimes, late at night, someone would look at a quiet teenager and wonder, what don't I see? Because Jacqueline Holloway didn't die in vain. She became a name people remembered. A warning whispered between neighbors. A story told not to scare, but to stop it from happening again. The city eventually sold the house, quietly. No listing, no ceremony, just a change of ownership and a fresh coat of paint, as if that could erase what had lived between its walls. But the neighbors remembered. The porch still felt wrong. The wind always seemed to blow a little colder on that side of the block. People crossed the street without realizing it. Kids no longer played near the hedges. Miss Thelma, now with a cane and slower steps, still walked by once a week. She never stopped long, just enough to glance at the window to check if the light had somehow returned. It never did. In her living room, the framed photo of Jacqueline sat beside her Bible. The same photo from the church bulletin, the one where she smiled like nothing could ever shake her faith. But it had been shaken, and the world around her had changed. In the years that followed, others in the community became more cautious. More questions were asked. More young boys were checked in on. More relatives were held accountable, no matter how sad their story sounded. And in that small but important shift, Jacqueline's story lived on. She was no longer just a woman who had opened her home. She was a line in the sand, a caution written in love, not fear. Because sometimes evil doesn't kick down the door. Sometimes it says thank you, eats your food, and calls you auntie. And still, despite all that, Jacqueline had believed. In second chances, in people, in family. Her mistake wasn't her heart. It was believing it could save someone who hadn't yet chosen to be saved. But it's that same heart that made her unforgettable. And now when strangers hear her story, they say the same thing. She didn't deserve that. And still, she gave everything.